Sticking in the MLB world, we did a Major League Baseball underdog draft on Underdog the other day. And you may be wondering, it's not even Christmas yet. Isn't it too early for a baseball draft? And the answer to that, of course, is hell no. It's never too early. So we're going to run through every pick we made. We're going to highlight only a few. I think we're going to do one pick from the early round for both of us, one from the middle round, and then one late round pick. I had the third overall pick. Braden had the ninth. With the first overall pick was Shohei Ohtani. Second overall was Aaron Judge, which left me with probably the easiest pick of the entire draft. There is a very clear top three of Ohtani, Aaron Judge, and then Juan Soto, especially in these underdog drafts where outfielders go off the board so fast. Juan Soto is the clear third overall pick, has been phenomenal each of the last two seasons. In a points league like this, in underdog, he has scored over 1,700 points each of the last couple of seasons, was a monster in his first year of that deal with the Mets. And quite honestly, I think he could have an even bigger year because we've seen a lot in the past. Guys who have this massive contract don't always live up to it in year one. Juan Soto did. So going into year two, I think there could even be better things to come. Go ahead.
I was going to go to my pick. So,
Well, yeah, after Juan Soto was Corbin Carroll, Ronald Acuna, Kyle Schwarber, who has outfield eligibility on Underdog, Fernando Tatis, and then right before you was the first infielder of the draft in the form of Bobby Witt Jr., and then you had the ninth pick, Braden.
yeah, I went with Julio Rodriguez here. He had his second 30-30 season in 3 years in 2025. I think he could be an MVP candidate in 2026. Very high floor. Also has an incredibly high ceiling. I don't know if he's going to break into the top three of Ohtani, Judge, and Soto, but at the very least, I think he could finish as the fourth highest scorer in best ball formats this year. The strikeouts aren't a concern because you don't lose points for him in underdog point formats. So I think he's a great pick at the end of round one.
Yeah, I think Julio Rodriguez in the back of round one is fantastic. I had another draft the other day where I had the seventh pick, and I actually took him at number 7 over guys like Bobby Witt and Fernando Tatis. So I think he's in line for a really big year. He's a very streaky player, usually in the sense of he has a rougher first half and then really comes alive in the second half. We saw that in 2023 when he broke out. He saw it in 2024 when he had a kind of disappointing year. And then we saw it again last year in a big way. So I think if we can get more of 2025 Julio Rodriguez, getting him at number 9 is going to be a great value. So I love that pick there. Rounding out the first round was Kyle Tucker, Ellie De La Cruz, and Yordan Alvarez. Rafael Devers, Eric Skubal, and Vladdy Jr. started round 2. And then Braden, you had the 204.
Yeah, at the 204, I took James Wood. He had an excellent rookie season, had a triple slash of 256, 350, 475. Also knocked 31 home runs, drove in 94 runs, and swiped 15 bases. And granted, there was kind of a big discrepancy between his first and second half of the season. He did cool off pretty considerably. Before the All-Star break, his OPS was 915. After the break, he had a 690 OPS, but he did bounce back in September with a 785 OPS and 5 home runs. So I think there's some hope that it's not just a hot start and then he'll fall off after that. Has a great StatCast page, a lot of stuff in the 80 plus percentile. His expected WOBA was 361, expected slugging percentage of 487. Great in the exit velo, barrel, and hard hit categories as well. And one of the main reasons I liked him is he hits both righties and lefties well. Had an 825 OPS against righties and an 823 OPS against lefties. And additionally, the strikeout rate, which is the big knock on him, he was in the second percentile in strikeout rate. Does not matter with underdog scoring. You're not subtracting points, so it's not a factor whatsoever. I think James Wood this year is going to be a very good player for the entirety of the 2026 campaign. There is the question mark of if the Nationals are going to, trade some pieces. In particular, I've seen CJ Abrams floated as a trade candidate. That would hurt James Wood's production, I think. You're probably going to have fewer RBIs in that instance. But if the Nationals can improve the lineup, the ceiling is even higher for James Wood.
Yeah, and the only thing I was going to mention was the first half for second half splits. Maybe early round 2, I don't love it as much, but I just took him mid to late round 2 in a different draft, so I can't complain too much. The upside is certainly there for him to be a first rounder after this season, so I don't mind it too much. After you took James Wood, went Gunnar Henderson, Jose Ramirez, Jackson Churio, Brent Rooker, and then Cal Raleigh. And then I had the 210. And my early round spotlight is going to be on my second round pick. I went with Garrett Crochet. I did that over Paul Skeens. I didn't really want to do it. I was really hoping that Brent Rooker or Jackson Churio would fall to me, mainly because I think after Tarek Skubal this year, there's a teardrop. Garrett Crochet threw 212 innings last year, and for a guy with an injury history like him, that's worrisome in my opinion. He was also a ridiculous 18-5 last year on a team that didn't even win 90 games. That's likely not repeatable. He's got a very good pitch mix, but his fastball and cutter, his two primary pitches, are nothing more than average compared to other MLB pitchers from a movement perspective. His best pitch is a sweeper, and he throws it only 16% of the time. I would love to see that jump to 20, 25% and kind of have it work more off of his four seam and his sinker. If I'm getting super nitpicky, his ERA from the second half of the year was a full run higher than his first half ERA. It was still only a 3.2, so I'm not too concerned about that. But this is not to say that if Garrett Crochet approaches 200 innings again this season, that he won't firmly be in the Cy Young conversation. I just don't think it's realistic to have those same expectations coming into 2026. So, with that said, there is still plenty of scenarios where Garrett Crochet is the best pitcher in fantasy baseball this year. But as someone who took him, I was not a huge fan of my own pick.
Yeah, and I've also been a little bit sketched out by Garrett Crochet, at least when it comes to best ball drafts so far this year. He's been healthy the last 2 years. You touched on him pitching over 200 innings last year. He missed the entirety of 2022 with Tommy John surgery, and then in 2023 made just 13 appearances, with both elbow and shoulder injuries. He absolutely possesses the upside of being the starting pitcher one, and you know, honestly, he could be the starting pitcher one by a considerable amount. I don't expect that to be the case because Paul Skeens and Tarek Skubal are both excellent pitchers as well. But the cost of taking Garrett Crochet in mid to late round two, especially when that cost is a hitter like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Francisco Lindor in the infield or Yordan Alvarez in the outfield, it's not a great situation to take Crochet there. So for the most part, I've been avoiding him as well. He is a guy I want to get, maybe a couple of shares of. But for the vast majority of drafts I'm doing, I'm staying the hell away from Garrett Crochet in fantasy, especially in best ball where you can't make changes if he gets hurt during the year. In redraft formats, it's less of an issue because you can drop him if he's going to be missing a couple months, or you can stick him on your IL slot. But for best ball, it's all or nothing.
And I was actually just looking as you were talking. Garrett Crochet, believe it or not, in best ball was the number one starting pitcher. But again, a lot of that was the 205 innings he threw and an 18-5 record, both of which I would not bet on repeating again. So, with that said, we move on. Paul Skeens and Pete Alonso rounded out the second round. Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Nick Kurtz started the third round. And then at the 303, I took Francisco Lindor. Is not flashy by any means, but he is one stolen base away in 2024 from three straight 30-30 seasons. He's not going to hit for a crazy high average, but he's going to hit right around 260, 270, pretty much guaranteed. You know what you're getting with Lindor. So for my roster build, I went outfield and pitcher round 1 and 2. Probably didn't want to wait on an infielder, especially after passing up Pete Alonso and Nick Kurtz in my second round. So to get a guy who is very safe, you know what you're getting with Lindor as my first outfielder, I thought was not bad. And then after Francisco Lindor went Jarren Duran, Roman Anthony, Pete Crow Armstrong, Matt Olson, and Junior Caminero. And then Braden, you had the 309.
I went with another Mariners outfielder here in Randy Arozarena. I've kind of loved the strategy of taking heavy outfielders early when it comes to these underdog drafts. Randy has some flaws, but he's also basically a guaranteed 2020, and he was nearly a 30-30 in 2025. If he can, post similar numbers this year, I think getting him in round 3 is an excellent pickup, especially considering you have the stack with him and Julio. And I'm curious to see because I've never tried to stack before in baseball drafts. I've obviously done it a ton in football. In basketball drafts, you mostly want to stay away from it. So I'm curious to see if there's a positive return on stacking players in baseball.
Yeah, and I mean, I to some extent I did the same thing with Soto and Lindor. So we're in the same boat on that. But after you took Arozarena. Wyatt Langford, Jackson Merrill, and Freddie Freeman rounded out the third round. Mookie Betts, Riley Green, and George Springer started the fourth. And then Braden, you had the 404.
I made the bold choice here to take a fourth outfielder, and it's a bold choice because you only start three of those guys on a weekly basis. You could have a fourth guy represent your flex, but given how fast outfielders come off the board, I wanted to make sure I had three outfielders that I could reliably count on. If one of those guys misses some time, I've still got three other great options. So I went with Seiya Suzuki here. He flew a little bit under the radar last year because his batting average and OPS dropped a bit, but he had a career high 32 home runs and was in the top 20% of MLB in a ton of hitting metrics on StatCast. I think he's in line for another very successful season this year. And if that batting average jumps back up a little bit, he could potentially be the steal of the draft for me.
And then after you took Seiya Suzuki, went Bryce Harper, Ian Happ, Cody Bellinger, Ketel Marte, and then Christopher Sanchez. At the 410, I went with Tyler Soderstrom. I don't love him as my second outfielder, but it was either him, Christian Yelich, who I don't love either as a second outfielder. He's getting up there in age, or O'Neal Cruz, who just has a lot of red flags. So I went with Soderstrom. 25 home runs last year, 276 batting average. The expected stats are indicating maybe he overperformed a little bit, but not by much. So for a guy that's still 24 years old, presumably has room to grow. I don't mind that at the back end of the fourth. And then Christian Yelich and Logan Webb rounded out the fourth round. Hunter Brown and Jazz Chisholm started the fifth. And then I mentioned O'Neal Cruz. I did still go with him. Hit 20 homers, 38 stolen bases last year. Talent-wise and tools-wise, I mean, he is one of the best. I mean, 6'7", with that kind of speed and power, you just can't teach. So if he's able to put things together, like he had a pretty good start to the season in the first half and then just kind of fell off. If we can get that first half consistency hitting at the top of the lineup in a points league, O'Neal Cruz is going to deliver in a massive way. So as my third outfielder, I think that's pretty solid value. After O'Neal Cruz went Manny Machado, Jurickson Profar, Taylor Ward, Brandon Nimmo, and Dylan Cease. And then Braden, you had the 509.
At the 509, I went with a guy who could either be I guess, winning pick or an advancing losing pick in Austin Riley. He's missed 112 games over the last 2 years, and his numbers have dropped pretty significantly from his peak in 2021 through 2023. But the underlying power metrics are pretty solid. They tell me that he has at least a chance to get back to hitting 35 or more home runs if he can stay healthy for a full season. If I can get 140 games and 30 home runs out of Austin Riley, I will be a very happy camper taking him at the back end of round.
Yeah, I have very little to add to that. I think that's a slam dunk. This is a guy who's right around the third round consistently, so to get him at the back of the fifth is fantastic. After you took Riley, went Trey Turner, Byron Buxton, and Teoscar Hernandez to round out the fifth round. Brian Wu, Cole Reagans, and Zach Neto started the sixth. And then Braden, you were back at the 604.
I grabbed another Mariner here in Josh Naylor. He's an easy choice to continue my Mariners stack. He's got a high floor because of a high batting average. He hit 295 in 2025, and also has a pretty high ceiling. He had a 20 home run, 30 stolen base season last year. I don't necessarily expect him to repeat that, but if he can put up a 2020 season or even a 15-20 season, I still think it's good value for Naylor here as my second infielder off the board. I think he's a very solid choice to balance out some of the risk with Austin Riley.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that's a fantastic pick, very safe as your second outfielder in the sixth round. After you took Naylor, went Blake Snell, Jose Altuve, Logan Gilbert, Corey Seager, and Geraldo Perdomo. And then I was up at the 610, and nothing screams high risk, high reward like an A's stack. And that's exactly what I did. I went with Lawrence Butler. This is another pick that frankly just terrifies me. But the upside at this spot, I couldn't ignore needing another outfielder. Hit 234, and actually overperformed slightly. His first half versus second half splits are drastically different. He had 14 extra base hits after the All-Star break. Not good. So I'm definitely hoping that first half Lawrence Butler is what I'm getting. But as a fourth outfielder, I'm a little more willing to take on that risk. After him went Spencer Strider and Chris Sale to round out the sixth. And then Freddie Peralta and Alex Bregman kicked off the seventh round. I took my second pitcher of the draft in the seventh. I went with Hunter Green. The injuries are the only thing holding Hunter Green back. 107 innings last year, 150 the previous year, but the underlying metrics are all fantastic. If he stays healthy for a full season, he's going to be probably a top 10 pitcher in fantasy baseball. So to get him as my SB2 in the seventh round, I was very, very happy with that. After Hunter Green went Kyle Stowers, Max Fried, Stephen Kwan, Jacob DeGrom, and Mike Trout. And then Braden, you went with another outfielder at the 709.
Yeah, I didn't love this pick particularly. I kind of felt like I got my hand forced, but I went with Brian Reynolds here. He had a down year in 2025. This selection is kind of a bounce back prediction. Prior to last year, he had never had an OPS below 790 in a full season. Last year, I think his OPS was 721. So if I can get back to at least 750, getting him in round 7 is good value. But at the same time, I'm not 100% confident that that will happen.
And then, yes, after you took Brian Reynolds, went Michael Harris, CJ Abrams, and Willie Adames to round out the seventh. Framber Valdez, Jesus Luzardo, and Zach Wheeler kicked off the eighth. And then, Braden, you went with a pitcher in the eighth round.
Yeah, for my first pitcher, I went with Joe Ryan. The eighth round is pretty late to grab your first pitcher, but I've been perfectly comfortable with doing that. I think it's great for two reasons. Either Ryan remains with the Twins and does not get traded, and he gets to face a lot of mediocre to bad hitters within the American League Central, or he gets traded and has the potential to rack up close to 20 wins. Either way, he's going to provide a solid ERA and great strikeout numbers regardless of where he plays. So he's got a very high floor, and the ceiling is potentially being a top 12 starting pitcher.
And I have not been waiting on pitcher very much in these drafts, but seeing you get Joe Ryan as your number one guy in the early to mid eighth round, that's opening my eyes a little bit. So I might have to start doing that. Heliot Ramos went after that, followed by Anthony Santander, Vinny Pasquantino, George Kirby, and Nick Pivetta. And then my middle round spotlight is going to be my eighth round pick. I went with Ben Rice, first baseman for the Yankees. There is a very strong chance that come late March, Ben Rice is my most drafted player this year. If we check his baseball savant page, there are more metrics 91st percentile or higher than there are 90th percentile or lower. His worst metric was his walk rate, and it was still 63rd percentile. Do you remember that super hot start that Ben Rice had in late March, early April? Well, actually, when he was at his best was August and September. Second half of the season, he hit 281 with an 894 OPS. He drastically underperformed last year, according to his underlying numbers, and he still hit 26 homers with an 836 OPS. He wasn't an everyday player because he would often sit against lefties, but Aaron Boone has already come out and said that he's going to be playing a lot versus lefties this year. The fact that he's going in the late eighth round, frankly, boggles my mind. And in redraft leagues as a bonus, this is not redraft, but in your redraft leagues, he will have catcher eligibility. He's projected to hit third for the Yankees this year, right behind Aaron Judge. I think he's an all-star in 2026. Draft Ben Rice.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat on Ben Rice. I mean, you kind of stole all my talking points. The one thing I do want to mention is if Cody Bellinger walks or if he stays, it benefits Ben Rice either way. Either Bellinger's going to hit behind him, probably hit fourth, I would think, for the Yankees, or maybe fifth, depending where they, slot in some other guys. And Rice will have more chances to score runs, or he walks, and Ben Rice is guaranteed to hit third in this batting order, or potentially he hits fourth, and either way is in a great spot to clean up some RBIs. I think last year's 26 home run, 836 OPS season is just the tip of the iceberg for him.
And then after I went with Ben Rice, William Contreras and Eugenio Suarez rounded out the eighth. Bo Bichette, who I wanted with my next pick, and then Joe Adell started the ninth. I went with another infielder here. I went with Maikel Garcia. Really a breakout year for him last year. 16 homers, 23 stolen bases. 23 RBI would be nothing. But hit 286 as well. The underlying metrics largely back that up. With as good of a defender as he is, 98th percentile, outs above average, he's going to be an everyday guy. And in a points league, and even where strikeouts don't matter that much, he draws a lot of walks, hits the ball hard, and just puts the ball in play. So I'm all about that in a points league. And as my third outfielder, I think I could have done a lot worse. So I'm not mad at that at all. After I went with Garcia, went Sonny Gray, Spencer Schwellenbach, Michael Bush, Pablo Lopez, and Jacob Mizorowski. And then Braden, you were back up with your ninth round pick.
Yeah, in the ninth round, I took my spotlight guy for the middle rounds. It was my sixth outfielder and my final outfielder, in fact, and that is Jack Caglione. He had a pretty rough rookie season after getting the call to the big leagues in June. In 210 at bats, he slashed just 157, 237, 295, which was good enough for a 532 OPS. The power we expected to see wasn't quite there. He had just 7 home runs. However, I am betting that Cags will be much improved at the MLB level in 2026. In 95 career minor league games, he's slashed 308, 377, 547, and has 22 home runs. And in his 28 games at AAA last year before getting called up to the big leagues, he had 11 home runs and had an OPS north of 1100. Besides his great numbers in the minor leagues, do you want to know the biggest reason that I think Caglione is going to break out in 2026? He's already improved dramatically in the offseason once. At high A, after being drafted in 2024, he slashed 241, 302, 388 with 2 home runs. When he opened the 2025 season at Double A, he proceeded to increase those numbers to 322, 394, 553, and 9 home runs, playing just 9 additional games. With an expectation of how to face MLB caliber pitchers under his belt now, I have no doubt that CAG is going to show why he was the number 6th overall pick in the 2024 draft during the 2026 season.
And that's a great note on the offseason improvements. I was not aware of all that. So that's good to know. But yeah, even with a disappointing season, I mean, his underlying metrics were not good, but not nearly as bad as the actual stats would say. His expected batting average was 84 points above what his actual batting average was. His X slug was over 120 points higher. His X WOBA was at 319, so right around league average. Didn't strike out a ton, walked a fair amount, right around 8%, which is not bad for a rookie. So for a guy with all the tools like Cags has, still 22 years old, I think there is still plenty of time for him to put things together. And with those offseason improvements, potentially, like you mentioned, I think that's a perfectly fine time to take the chance on him in the late ninth round. After you took Caglione, went Andy Pajes, Jacob Marcy, and Matt Chapman to round out the ninth. Chase Burns and Jackson Holliday started the 10th, followed by Dylan Cruz, and then Braden, you had the fourth pick of the 10th round.
Yeah, in round 10, I grabbed my second pitcher. I'm with Trey Savage here. I am all aboard the Trey Savage train after his elite postseason. He had a 3.58 ERA, a 105 whip, and 39 strikeouts in just 27 and two-thirds innings pitched. Additionally, I was really inspired by his first start of the postseason, where he carried a no-hitter into the sixth inning against the Yankees, had 11 strikeouts in that one. I am very excited to see what he can do, especially after he had a good September as well in the regular season. I think there's a chance that Trey Savage is, a top 20 starting pitcher in fantasy baseball this year.
Yeah, I love the value on that in the early 10th round. After you went with the Savage, went Kyle Bradish, Kevin Gausman, Bryce Turang, Marcelo Zuna, and Yandy Diaz. And then in the 10th, I went with my fifth outfielder. I went with Luis Robert Jr. This is another pick that just scares me shitless because Luis Robert, the first half of the season, hit 190 with 18 extra base hits across 76 games. Not good. And really, the power numbers did not get better in the second half. Just 8 extra base hits in 31 games post All-Star break, but hit 298 in the second half. So I think if we can see him put the ball in play more, which has been his biggest problem with just striking out way too much, I think eventually the extra base hits and the power are going to follow. In the 10th round, late 10th round, as my fifth outfielder, really not a whole lot of risk. So if we can get that second half Luis Robert Jr., I'm going to be a very happy man with that value. After I went with Luis Robert, went Mackenzie Gore and Shea Langoliers to round out the 10th, Cedane Rafaela and Brandon Woodruff, who, once again, I got sniped in the 11th round. I wanted Woodruff very badly, but he went the pick before me. And then I went with Nolan McLean, who I believe will technically still be a rookie in 2026. The top prospect for the Mets, arguably the top pitching prospect in baseball. in 48 innings last year, a 206 ERA, a 104 whip. Might have slightly overperformed, but not by much. I mean, the expected ERA was still 3.56. Gets a ton of strikeouts. Had a 30.3 strikeout percentage. Walks are a little bit of an issue, but that's not as much of an issue in best ball. So kind of the same thing as Trey Savage. I mean, there's so much upside to be had here, and to get him this late is a slam dunk in my opinion. So I was, despite getting sniped, I was still very happy with Nolan McLean. After I took him, went Kerry Carpenter, Jason Dominguez, Spencer Torkelson, Marcus Semien, and Jung Hoo Lee. And then Braden, you had the ninth pick of the 11th.
Yeah, in the 11th round, I went with another pitcher. I took Tyler Glasnow here. Glasnow obviously has a ton of risk, but I feel like it's all baked into his ADP. If you're getting a full season of Tyler Glasnow, he's going in the first 3 to 4 rounds for sure. And I think you can count on probably half of a season from Tyler Glasnow. He has never pitched more than 134 innings in the season. But in 2 of the last 3 years, he's pitched 120 and then 134 innings. Last year, those numbers were down to 90 and a third innings. I think there's a path to Glasnow pitching 150, maybe 160 innings this season. It's a very dimly lit path, but there is a path. And if I can get, 75% of the production, at least from a fantasy stealing standpoint, of Garrett Crochet at a fraction of the ADP cost, I think this is absolutely the better pick between those two.
I would agree with that. And then after you went with Glasnow, Yuri Perez, Sandy Alcantara, and Nico Horner rounded out round 11. Jordan Beck, Colton Cowser, and Cam Schlittler started the 12th round. And then Braden, you went with another pitcher in the 12th.
Yeah, I took Luis Castillo here. I don't love it, to be honest. I wanted either Perez or Schlittler, but I was a little bit rushed and got sniped on both those guys. I took Castillo in part because he plays in a very pitcher-friendly ballpark, and that showed last year. His ERA on the road was above, I think, 4.5. I think it was like 4.70 something. But at home, he posted a 2.6 ERA and a sub-1 whip. So if I can get a couple of weeks where he's making 2 starts at home in a row, there's potential for Luis Castillo to put up like 90 to 100 points in a week for me.
And it's funny, every Mariners pitcher just pitches better at home, like compared to on the road. And it's not even close. I don't fully understand it, but it's funny that it is that way. After you took Castillo, went Jacob Wilson, Ozzie Albies, Robbie Ray, Gavin Williams, and Tanner Bybee. And then I had the 10th pick of the 12th round. I went with Jordan Westberg, who I was all in on last year. He was probably my most drafted position player in 2025. Didn't necessarily live up to it, and I think a lot of that had to do with injuries. I'm not sure he was ever fully right because he started the season super hot and then just kind of faded out a little bit. But 17 homers in 352 plate appearances. The power is certainly there. The speed, which is kind of what I was, super excited about. Only stole one base, but 89th percentile sprint speed. So I think there is still plenty of upside for 2020 seasons from Jordan Westberg. And to get him roughly at the same price as last year, even after showing, a little bit more in the power department compared to 2024, I think there's still a lot of upside to be had. So late 12th round, I'm more than happy with that. After I took Westberg, Trent Grisham and Jeremy Pena rounded out round 12. Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon, a pair of Yankee starters, went to start the 13th round. And then I went with another pitching prospect. I went with Bubba Chandler, who Savage, McLean, and Bubba Chandler are kind of like the clear top 3 pitching prospects in baseball right now. So it's kind of funny that we scooped up all 3 of them. But Bubba Chandler has potential to be not Paul Skeens level, but a step below, which is still incredible. Had a 4.02 ERA in 31 innings last year, but the expected ERA was right around 3.6. Throws absolute ched. I mean, his average fastball was 99 miles an hour. So he's blowing it by guys. Does not walk anybody, which is great to see from a young pitcher. His walk percentage was 3.2. Not that that matters a ton for best ball, but to see that from a young guy, I think there's a lot of room to grow for Bubba Chandler. So I think it's not. I don't love having him and McLean as my SP3 and SP4, but like if one of these guys turns into what we expect them to be this year, I'm going to be very happy having that guy as my SP3. So that was a large part of what went into that for me. But after Bubba Chandler went Gleyber Torres, Hunter Goodman, Michael King, Aaron Nola, TJ Friedel, and then Braden, you had the ninth pick of the 13th round.
Yeah, you're talking about Nolan McLean and Bubba Chandler, hoping one of those guys pans out. That's how I feel about Jack Caglione and my 13th round pick, Colson Montgomery. Montgomery last year had kind of a weird season. He hit like 240, I think, but had 21 home runs and just 255 at bats. He does need to do better about getting on base in other ways if he's going to be a consistent fantasy contributor for me, especially in best ball formats. But his raw power at least provides him with a high ceiling. And if we could see, maybe a 30 home run season out of him this year, getting him in round 13 would be great.
Absolutely. And then after you took him, Tatsuya Imai, I might have butchered that. Apologies if so. He went right after Montgomery. Dansby Swanson and Dolis Garcia rounded out the 13th. Shota Imanaga, Zach Gallen, and Spencer Steer started the 14th round. And then Braden, you went with another pitcher.
Yeah, I took Jack Flaherty here. I don't love Flaherty a ton. He had an ERA above 4 last year. I think it was like 4.5 actually. He wasn't really able to pitch anywhere close to as well as he did in 2024. However, did have a 10.5 strikeouts per nine and a 385 FIP. Gives me some hope he might be able to get back to a sub 4 ERA. I think he was at like a 3.5 or 3.7 ERA in 2024 between Detroit and the Dodgers. I mean, getting him here, it's semi high risk, semi high reward. I'm not going to get a guy who's, competing to be an SP1 or even really an SP2. But if I can get like an SP3, a top 36 starting pitcher, I will absolutely take that in round 14.
After you went with Flaherty, went Brenton Doyle, Nick Castellanos, Christian Walker, Addison Barger, and Willier Abreu. And then I was up after that. I went with reigning National League Rookie of the Year, Drake Baldwin. It's usually not a great idea to take catchers in best ball just because they don't necessarily have the power upside of, say a corner infielder or a corner outfielder. But Drake Baldwin is just a really, really solid hitter. Hit 274 last year, had a expected batting average of 275, 19 homers, and a really, really solid defensive catcher that I think will keep him on the field quite a bit. So I don't know how much more room there is to grow in terms of a per game basis, but I think if we can just get steady production compared to last year out of Drake Baldwin in 2026, I think this is going to be a tremendous value late in the 14th round. After I went with Baldwin was Dalton Varsho, Trevor Story to round out the 14th, and then Nate Eovaldi and Ryan Pepio to start the 15th. I went with another pitcher. I wanted Nate Eovaldi, but shocker, I got sniped. But I went with Edward Cabrera, MLB The Show 21 legend, with that sinker. If you know, you know. But with Edward Cabrera, has not panned out the way a lot of people expected, including myself. But last year, we really kind of started to see the upside and why there was so much of it. Had a 3.99 expected ERA, but actually had a 3.56 actual ERA. Has a very, very solid 5 pitch mix with the changeup, the curve, the sinker, the slider, and the four seam. So I think if he's able to continue to build on what we saw in 2025, he could be a guy who finishes, as an SP2, SP3 in 2026. So to get him as my SP5, I was very, very happy with that. After I took Cabrera, went Brandon Lau, Trevor Rogers, Ezekiel Tovar, Shane Bieber, and Roki Sasaki. And then Braden, it was your pick.
I took Isak Paredes in round 15. I was super excited about his fantasy potential last year after joining the Astros, getting a chance to hit into the Crawford boxes, perfect for a right-handed hitter. And he kind of underwhelmed a little bit. Had 20 home runs, hit around 250. I was expecting a little bit more than that. I'm really hoping that this is a case of never wrong, just early. I'm not going to hold my breath for it, but to get him in round 15, it's something I'm comfortable taking risk-wise because the payoff could be very large.
And I remember last year, Paredes and Jordan Westbrook were going like back to back to each other, and I always had to pick which one I wanted because I loved them both so much. But I'm with you. I think there's still a lot of upside to be had with Paredes this year, so I like that pick, late 15th. After you took him, went Nick Lodolo, Murakami, the Japanese first baseman / DH, and then Jack Leiter to round out the 15th round. Cade Horton, Chase DeLauder, and Mark Vientos started the 16th. And then Braden, you went with one of our Minnesota Twins.
Indeed, I did. I'm always high on this caliber of player in best ball. See my various selections of Xavier Edwards last year, and those panned out phenomenally. But I took Luke Keschall here. He's got a great chance to be the Twins' leadoff hitter in 2026. He hit 302 in 49 games last year, and also swiped 14 bags. I think he could have 50 plus steal potential as an everyday starter in 2026. Has a good chance to score quite a few runs. If he can hit, 290 or better, I think getting him in round 16 with the upside he possesses could be my best pick of the draft.
I would absolutely agree. And then after you went with Keishal, Chandler Simpson, Shane McClanahan, Yusei Kikuchi, Chris Bubich, and Ramon Laureano. And then my late round spotlight was my 16th round pick. I went with outfielder Dalen Lyle of the Nationals. A lot of people have probably never heard of Dalen Lyle, and that's okay because I hadn't heard of him until last year either when he hit 333 post All-Star break. I mentioned that 333 average. He hit 27 extra base hits and 210 at bats second half of the season. He hit 295 over the course of the year with an expected batting average of 305. That was 100th percentile. He hit 337 in AAA last year. He was 92nd percentile in sprint speed. Easily a guy with 20 plus stolen base upside. The easy comp for me is 2024 Jarren Duran. Not going to hit 30 home runs, but will hit 280, 290 with a shitload of doubles and triples and can steal 20 to 30 bags. He is a perfect points league late round target, in my opinion. He is projected to slot in third in that Nationals batting order behind James Wood and CJ Abrams. So to get him this late with all the upside that he has, in my opinion, that's a home run, and you better believe that pun is fully intended.
Yeah, Dalen Lyle's also a guy I really love. I've taken him in quite a few drafts already as well. His September last year was unbelievable. He slashed 391, 440, 772. His OPS was a whopping 1212. Had 6 home runs, 7 triples in the month of September, and 19 RBIs. He's got a potential for a 2020 season, maybe even a 25-25 season. I don't think he's going to be putting up, historic numbers every single week. I think we're going to get some hot and cold flashes from him, but that's why he's available in round 16.
Exactly. And then, after Dalen Lyle went Sal Frelick and Ranger Suarez to round out the 16th round. Salvador Perez and Spencer Arrighetti started the 17th. And then at the third pick of the 17th round, I went with Kyle Manzardo, who had a very big prospect profile last year and was just simply put not very good. Had a 768 OPS, which actually was higher than I realized. But hit 27 home runs, just didn't have the contact numbers that we expected to see. But hit 256 in the second half of the year last year. I think if we can get the contact and the batting average of the second half with the first half power, where he had 28 extra base hits over 82 games, I think if we can combine those two things together in the 17th round, Kyle Manzardo is going to be a very, very good value pick. After Manzardo went Augustine Ramirez, Matthew Boyd, Shane Smith, or might have been, is it Shane Smith or Sean Smith? I can never remember.
Shane Smith.
Shane Smith. Okay, so I was right the first time. Good to hear. After him was Merrill Kelly and Giancarlo Stanton, and then Braden, it was your pick.
Yeah, my 17th rounder is going to be my late round spotlight, and that is Hurston Waldrop. Sticking with my theme of former Florida Gators, in 9 starts and 1 relief appearance last year, Waldrop was 6-1 with a 2.88 ERA, a 1.19 WHIP, and an 8.8 strikeouts per 9. He also had above average run value according to Statcast with both his fastballs, his slider, and his curveball. So a very good pitch mix, effective with every single pitch. The Statcast page is a little bit of a mixed bag. His expected ERA was at 3.96, expected batting average allowed in the 30th percentile at 2.53, but does have a good whiff rate, although a very poor chase rate. So kind of a curious discrepancy on that front. Does a great job at limiting hard contact. Was 97th percentile in barrel rate allowed and 82nd percentile in ground ball rate. So there is a path to Hurston Waldrop being a very valuable starting pitcher this year. There's also a chance he completely flames out, but at round 17, I don't mind the risk.
Yeah, and he had a stint on my redraft team at the end of last year. He was doing phenomenal things late in the season. So I like that a lot in the late 17th round. After him was Noelvi Marte, Adley Rutschman, and Will Smith. It's just crazy to see Adley Rutschman late 17th round. What a fall from grace it's been for him. But to start the 18th was Brian Bayo, Xavier Edwards, and Royce Lewis. And then Braden, it was your pick after that.
I went with Nolan Shanuel in round 18. You pretty much know exactly what you're getting with Nolan Shanuel. Somewhere around a 260 batting average, a low 700s OPS, maybe a mid 700 OPS, but below 750 for sure, and 10 to 15 home runs. So getting a guy who I can count on to post reliable numbers in round 18 kind of balances out a lot of the high risk, high reward guys I've taken around him. I would say out of my last maybe 8 or 9 picks of this draft, 7 of them are, very high upside guys with low floors. Shanuel's kind of the opposite, and maybe we get a breakthrough from him. Maybe he posts like an 800 OPS, but it's not something I'm counting on.
Yeah, and I think consistency is just the name of Shanuel's game. Not flashy by any means, not going to hit for a lot of power, but in the 18th round, I think you can do a lot worse than that in the infield spot. So I don't mind that at all. Following that was Shane Baz, Joe Musgrove, Connolly Early, Jonathan Aranda, and Cedric Mullins. And then with my 18th round pick, I went with Mitch Keller. Not a flashy pick by any means, but in a points league, he's just a guy that's going to eat up innings. Not going to have a horrendously bad ERA. He's been between 419 and 425 each of the past 3 seasons. So I think you can expect somewhere around the 4.2 range again in 2026. But the main thing is just he eats up innings. And he was 6-15 as a starter last year. He won 24 games from 2023 to 2024. So if we can see an uptick in the wins department, I think as my SP6, I believe. But my SP6, I'm more than happy with that. To round out the 18th round was Mason Wynn and Lourdes Gurriel. Starting the 19th was Mickey Moniak and Lane Thomas. And then I know you were not happy with my 19th round pick. I went with Grayson Rodriguez, a guy who we talked about just last week on the pod. Didn't play at all in 2025 with an injury, but coming into the season, I was all in on him. The prospect pedigree has always been there. He's been a huge name for that reason and showed a lot of progress from 2023 to 2024. Had a sub-4 expected ERA in 2024. I think there's definitely going to be some innings restrictions in 2026 just because of, you missed the entire season in 2025. But I think talent-wise, he is well deserving of a 19th round pick. And so to get him there, I'm more than happy with it, considering you were taking him, inside like the top 10 rounds a year ago. But yes, after Grayson Rodriguez was Jose Soriano, Matt Shaw. I got to be honest, I've never even heard of this guy, Messick, a pitcher for the Guardians. I need to do some research on him. Luis Arias and Corbin Burns. And then Braden, it was your pick after that.
I took Quinn Priester in round 19. He was kind of an opener for a little bit for the Brewers, and then eventually got like a full-fledged rotation gig. He kind of flew under the radar a bit in 2025. A former semi-highly touted prospect for Pittsburgh. Didn't really pan out there. I think the Brewers are his third stop, actually, in the MLB. But last year had 13 wins, a 3.32 ERA, and a 7.6 strikeouts per nine. If he can get the strikeout numbers up, that's phenomenal. As long as he can keep the ERA low enough and eat some innings, I would be happy. If you can give me a low to mid threes ERA and pitch, let's say 180 innings, that would be a great season for Quinn Priester.
And just to circle back on Messick, whose name I was not familiar with, I owe him an apology because across 39 and 2/3 innings, he had a 2.72 ERA last year with the Guardians. So shout out to you, Parker. I was not familiar with your game. But continuing on, after Priester went Zebby Matthews, Mike Yastrzemski, and Christian Moore to round out the 19th round. And starting the final round, the 20th, was Owen Casey, Luis Gil, and Dustin May. And then Braden, your final pick of the draft was a pitcher.
Yeah, I took Luis Severino in round 20. There were 2 reasons for this. First, and probably the bigger reason, is that he was not really being selected in most drafts. So if Severino were to go on to have a great year, I could get a potential competitive advantage over other drafters if I were able to advance. And the second reason is I selected him for when he pitches on the road. In 2025, Severino was 2-9 with a 6.01 ERA when the A's were at home in Sacramento. But when they were on the road, he was 6-2 with a 3.02 ERA. If I can get a couple of weeks where he makes 2 starts on the road, or honestly, even just 1 start on the road, if he has a really good outing, that's a great situation to be in for Severino. And I'm not counting on any points when he's pitching at home.
Well, yeah, there you go. And then after Severino was Bryce Eldridge, Xander Bogaerts, Sean Burke, Anthony Volpe, and Brandon Pfaadt. And then my final pick of the draft was an outfielder. I went with Dylan Beavers, who is expected to be, I would presume, a bottom of the order bat for the Orioles. But he's their number 2 prospect right now in their system. He's a top 100 guy. Only got 137 plate appearances last year. Didn't do a whole lot with it, but still had a 775 OPS. A large part of that was his 375 OBP. Because, only hit 227, a 216 expected batting average, but walked a ton, had a 19% walk percentage. That would have been 100% percentile if he was eligible. Has an 89th percentile sprint speed, so I think you can expect a lot of stolen bases as well. Did very, very well in the minors and AAA last year, so I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, especially with how loaded this Orioles lineup is for Dylan Beavers. And then the final 2 picks of the draft was Ivan Herrera and Andrew Abbott. But yeah, that was it for our underdog draft.